Welcome to this session, Read Alouds for All Classroom Environments. I'm Robin Dixon, Pre-K through 5th grade ELA consulting teacher, and I will be your presenter for this session. Let's begin by examining our learning intention and our success criteria for this session. In this session, you're going to learn how to effectively use Read Alouds in any classroom setting. You will be successful when you can list the benefits of Read Alouds in the classroom, as well as ways to incorporate Read Alouds in any type of classroom setting. And your success criteria also includes gaining knowledge of Read Alouds for science and social studies. Take a moment to pause and reflect on how you're currently using Read Alouds in your classroom. So pause the video, reflect on the question, and when you are ready, push play. So hopefully you had some things to think about as you are pondering how you use Read Alouds in your classroom. Perhaps you use them in centers or you use it during transition times. You may have listed a myriad of ideas of how you're currently using Read Alouds. Let's take a moment to watch a video that talks about the why and of why we do Read Alouds.
15 years ago, I was a teaching artist in the New York City public schools, and one of my projects was adapting and directing a production of Charlotte's Web with a group of third graders at PS 220, the Mott Haven Village School in the South Bronx. As a way to begin our work together, I read aloud the first chapter from E.B. White's famous and beautiful book. As some of us may recall, the story begins with Fern learning that her father, Mr. Arable, is off to the hog house to kill the runt of the litter with his axe. "Please don't kill it," she sobbed. "It's unfair." Mr. Arable stopped walking. "Fern," he said gently, "you will have to learn to control yourself." "Control myself," yelled Fern. "This is a matter of life and death, and you talk about controlling myself?" Tears ran down her cheeks, and she took hold of the axe and tried to pull it out of her father's hand. Well, the pig is saved, and later that morning, Fern discovers a carton on her chair at breakfast. As she approached her chair, the carton wobbled, and there was a scratching noise. Fern looked at her father. Then she lifted the lid of the carton. There, inside, looking up at her, was the newborn pig. It was a white one. The morning light shone through its ears, turning them pink. "He's yours," said Mr. Arable, "saved from an untimely death, and may the good Lord forgive me for this foolishness." Fern couldn't take her eyes off the tiny pig. "Oh," she whispered, "oh, look at him. He's absolutely perfect." She closed the carton carefully. First she kissed her father, then she kissed her mother, then she opened the lid again, lifted the pig out, and held it against her cheek. Well, when I finished reading the chapter, the kids lined up for lunch, and a little boy named Joey tugged on my sleeve, and he said, "Miss B, I felt like I was right there. Like I could really see that little pig. I never got inside a book before like that." Well, I was thrilled that Joey was enjoying the story, but to be perfectly honest, at the time, I was much more concerned with how in the world we were going to make all those farm animal costumes just using pillowcases and whether the kids would memorize all their lines or not. They did, and we did. And every time I visited that classroom, the kids couldn't wait for me to read aloud to them again. For all the kids in the audience, would you raise your hand if you really like it when teachers read aloud to you or parents read aloud to you? Or adults. Do you remember being read to and loving it? Well, I've been an educator for almost 20 years, and I've read thousands and thousands of pages aloud, and I've never met a group of kids who didn't love it, who were immune to the spell of a great book being read aloud. As a teacher and a mom, I can't think of many things that matter as much as reading aloud to our kids at all ages, at school and at home, because reading aloud gives kids a special kind of access to the transformative power of story and to the experience of what real reading is all about, which is to deeply understand, to think, to learn and discuss big ideas about the world, about the lives of others, and about ourselves. So when I think back to what Joey said to me all those years ago, Miss B, I felt like I was right there, like I could really see that little pig. I never got inside a book before like that. I'm struck by this idea that reading aloud for Joey made it possible for him to get inside a book, as though before that experience, he was outside. Because Joey's not alone in feeling that way. Reading for a lot of kids can feel like a locked building. Without the right key or the right code or the right experiences, they can't get in. They feel like they're outside. Because for some kids, dealing with the code, the tangle of letters and sounds, tricky words and vocabulary, is a more difficult process for any number of reasons. The decoding of words takes up so much brain energy, they don't have a lot of brain space left over to actually take in the story or the meaning. For other kids, the decoding isn't so difficult, but it can sometimes feel like they're just translating words across a page, like how I might do with a medical textbook or a medical journal. I could translate or decode the words, but I wouldn't be able to understand them or think or talk about them. How many of us here have found ourselves halfway down a page only to realize, I have no idea what I just read? When teachers and parents read aloud, we do the decoding work. We deal with the print and the tricky vocabulary and words, and we free kids to think. So they can use all their brain energy to imagine the story and learn new information. So all children listening have access to the amazing reading party happening inside the building. And we want kids to get in the building and get to the party and stay there, even while they're still strengthening their decoding or comprehension or vocabulary muscles in books they can read on their own. Because even when kids are reading on their own, reading aloud to them has a tremendous impact on their independent reading lives. Because when kids go back to their own books, they know that words should come alive in their brains as they read. They know that real readers pause to wonder, think, ask questions. They know that real readers let the stories affect them, maybe even change them. Because the way that we stop and react to something that we read aloud gives us an opportunity to model compassion, to wonder aloud in a genuine way about a choice a character or a community made. When we read aloud, we can help kids walk in the shoes of people who might be radically different from themselves, or see reflections of themselves, which might make them feel less alone or more hopeful. What happens when we walk in the shoes of Kek, a young refugee from Sudan who comes to Minnesota after seeing his brother and father killed in a war? What can we learn from Augie, who was born with a rare facial anomaly? Or Delphine, who's 11 years old and goes to Oakland, California in 1968 to meet her mom for the first time, who's active in the Black Panther Party? Or Anne-Marie, who helps her best friend escape to Denmark during the Holocaust. We can give kids access to stories and books and ideas and information that they otherwise might not get a chance to explore, or explore as deeply. And finally, reading aloud gives us a chance to look up from our screens, our phones, our computers, to connect with each other through the simple act of reading and talking together. When we read aloud at school, we're often gathered together in one place. And we're teaching kids how to talk together, how to listen, how to look each other in the eye and say, what do you think? To say, I think differently and here's why. But we're also creating moments of connectedness and joy in our classrooms on a daily basis. And at home, it's a chance to carve out a time when we're not on our phones, but we're entirely focused on our kids, where we pull up alongside them and read and talk together, even when they can't sit in our laps anymore, even and perhaps especially when they'd rather be on their phones, even when they're not 3 or 4 but they're 8, 10, 12, a teenager, and they might not be as inclined to share so much with us anymore. Having a book to lean on can help us get inside them. In her new book, Reclaiming Conversation, Sherry Turkle reminds us how essential face-to-face conversation is. She says we're tempted to think that our little sips of online connection add up to a big gulp of real conversation, but they don't. I believe that reading aloud together provides an opportunity for a big gulp, for a chance to connect and talk together in consistent, meaningful ways, so that kids not only fall in love with books and reading and get better at it, but they also learn to think deeply, to consider other points of view. They learn to listen, and they learn to look up. Thank you.
What an excellent overview of some of the many benefits of a read aloud in a classroom. So building on what she presented in the video, what are other benefits that you can have to using read alouds in the classroom? It builds community. Our students are able to rally around, just like she said in the video, rally around a common story and rally around how to build a stronger community, that classroom community, or community that is larger than just the classroom, the school, or the neighborhood, for example. It also models fluency and expression in reading. We often talk about those skills being so essential, but students need to see that modeled. And we're reading with expression and prosody. We're showing our students what strong fluency looks like. It also helps students make sense of the world and improves information processing skills. In one of the books that she was talking about a student seeing, or a girl seeing her mom for the first time. Think about how many students we have that may go through a similar experience. So it helps them to make sense of those events personally, and also reading a story about a world event and processing some of the tough things that have gone on in the world and helping them to make sense of them. It also helps students develop good listening habits. We want students to be good listeners, but we need to give them time to practice. It's also a way to develop stronger vocabulary. We know that in a read aloud, we can read at least 2 grade levels above a student's reading level. So it helps to give exposure to strong vocabulary as well. Reading aloud also increases attention span, and we know how critical attention span is to a student and also to brain research, and that we have to build in experiences where we are having students increase their attention. It also helps students access learning that may not have been possible. When she was referring to when we do a read aloud that we're giving a higher cognitive load to the students, we're freeing up the process that they would spend decoding words to giving them time to think about the actual words in the text. We can also expose them to content level area reading, but give them access at higher levels. Teachers can also do think alouds while they're reading. They can monitor or they can model. This is how we do predictions. Oh my gosh, this was so exciting when. Oh, my prediction was wrong because. So it's a great way to model what good readers do to our students. You will see an article, and the bit.ly is on the screen, so you can pause the video, type that bit.ly in your browser, and read the article. In the article, it's going to list 4 benefits of a read aloud. And as you're reading, I want you to think about, what's the biggest benefit for your students, past and present? If read alouds are something that are new for you or you haven't done as much of recently, what would have been one of the benefits for students that you've already had, or your students for the upcoming school year? And how will you ensure that these benefits are in your classroom and with your read-alouds? So pause the video, go to the bit.ly, read the article, ponder the questions, and when you are ready, proceed to the next slide. Now that we've talked about the benefits of read-alouds, how do we incorporate read-alouds in the classroom? These can be incorporated through the use of centers. You can record the video, post it on Seesaw, have students watch it in a center, or you could put the MP4 out on Seesaw or another format. You can also take ReadyGen stories that are posted in the district Seesaw catalog, and you can put those on Seesaw for your students to read. This would be a great place where you could also take a ReadyGen story that may not be in your grade level, but has a great theme or topic that you would love to incorporate within your classroom. Read-alouds are an excellent incorporation during science and social studies. In math, read-alouds are also critical in math. Greg Tang for example, has several read-alouds that can be incorporated in the classroom. So using a read-aloud during content is a way to front-load material, it's a way to reteach, and it's also a way to make learning accessible to students in a very tangible way. Let's say you're wanting to incorporate read-alouds in a remote fashion. Again, you could use pre-recorded ReadyGen stories. You could read and record for students to watch outside of classroom. That's working on that flipped classroom model. So maybe they watch it outside of class, or they watch it during the center and they come back and you talk about the read aloud as a class. You can also add reader response answers onto a Seesaw. You can create a journal response in response to the read aloud that you have incorporated. In the classroom, you can also pair a read aloud with anchor text in ReadyGen, for example, finding a text that has the same theme or topic but extends and enriches. You can also use these to introduce or extend a science or social studies concept. If you want to go deeper in the topic, you could do that through a read aloud, for example. And social emotional content. Read alouds are an excellent way to also incorporate social and emotional learning. And a read aloud also bridges for students a way to bring up topics that they may be struggling with and that students are relating to the characters, and it's a natural lead-in for students to share their experiences or how they can relate to the characters. So take a moment to pause the video and think about what are some other ways that you can incorporate read-alouds in your classroom setting. Take a moment to pause and reflect on how you could up the rigor of your read-alouds in science, social studies, with social emotional learning, any other ideas that you can think of, and jot those down so that you'll have them accessible to you as you are planning your lessons for the school year and finding ways to incorporate read-alouds within your classroom. On the screen, you will see a book entitled Jim Trelease's Read Aloud Handbook. And this book has been around for decades. I remember using this as a student teacher to help me plan and find read-alouds that would go with units that I was creating when I was student teaching. And this is an amazing book because it's really just a treasure trove of books that tie into different subjects and grade levels that you can use in your classroom. And an Amazon book review says, Jim Trelease's Read Aloud Handbook, updated and revised by education specialist Cindy Georgis, discusses the benefits, the rewards, and the importance of reading aloud to children of a new generation. supported by delightful anecdotes as well as the latest research, an updated treasury of book recommendations curated with an eye for diversity. Jim Trelease's Read Aloud Handbook offers proven techniques and strategies for helping children of all backgrounds and abilities discover the pleasure of reading and setting them on the road to becoming lifelong readers. And I think this is so important when it talks about a new generation. We know that students may come to us not having been read to the way that maybe we were perhaps in the past. So think about our students and how they are very wise with technology. They've listened to stories on the computer. But it's not quite the same as that intimate relationship with you and the students and the book, and how that creates a relationship using all three. So in Jim Trelease's book, I put the link for you. We're going to go to this website and we're going to look at what exactly is in Jim Trelease's handbook and why this might be a benefit for you and your classroom. On the screen, you will see the table of contents for the Read Aloud Handbook. And you'll notice the various chapters located within this book. You'll see an introduction. You'll see chapter 2, which is all about why read aloud. And you'll notice all these different topics that it talks about for the benefits of reading aloud and why we need to do this. We have when to begin read alouds. And you'll notice that it talks about, we were talking about attention span. Can I expand my child's attention span? Is there something that I could buy to help my child read better? How old must a child be before you start reading to him? We know the importance of reading to children from a very young age. We then see stages of a read aloud. So what are the stages that we go through? The do's and don'ts of read alouds. So if you click on this link, and you'll also see at the top the website, I'm highlighting it and underlining it for you right here. If you go to that link, you will get to this very same page, and you can explore Jim Trelease's book more in depth. Whether you are new to using read alouds in the classrooms or this is something that you've done for years, how can we become even stronger at utilizing read alouds in the classroom? I hope you found that brief overview of Jim Trelease's handbook beneficial, and I hope that you'll explore the website and that you will find some new information to help you as you're implementing read alouds in your classroom. On the screen, I have listed 4 resources that you might want to consider as you're delving into read alouds in the classroom. The first we just looked at, which was Jim Trelease's homepage. The next is a Reading Rockets article, and you'll see in the link if you would like to go back to read this article, or you could type Reading Aloud to Build Comprehension and Reading Rockets. So this article gives us additional information about how we can use read alouds to also benefit comprehension. The next article, and I've got the link at the top, and you can come here and download this for later use. What are the benefits of a read aloud? So you can read additional benefits. And the benefits of reading aloud to older students. Sometimes we tend to think of a read aloud as something that is done in a primary grade, but read alouds are extremely beneficial with our older readers as well. We sometimes think kids don't like read alouds, but our older intermediate students still love read alouds, and there are still benefits for them. So this article will give you additional information about read alouds with older students. So you can stop and pause and go to those websites now, or you can view them later and on your own time after this presentation. We talked about science and social studies and the importance of read alouds in content area. So I just want to show you these briefly. First of all, we have K through 3 social studies. And this is a Scholastic article. And you'll see I've highlighted, or I'm pointing out to you in grades K through 3, a resource from Scholastic. And this is an excellent resource because it also gives us books that tie in to current social studies topics for grades K through 3. So you'll see here, Nobody Owns the Sky, the story of brave Bessie Coleman. So you can come down here and you can find books that tie into what you're studying in social studies. And it also gives a brief synopsis of the book. The second resource is EPIC. And we know that EPIC is a resource that many teachers in the district use. So again, we can have read-alouds on EPIC, and you'll see that it ties to social studies. We see families around the world, which would be great for our K-3 readers. We see community long ago, so in 3rd grade, how communities have changed over time. So EPIC gives us some great read-alouds as well. And this is a very exciting resource from the Next Generation Science Standards. And if you go to Next Generation Science and search read-alouds, it will take you to the standard, and it will take you to some read-aloud books that you might choose. So here's kindergarten, Force and Stability, Forces and Interaction. Let's look over here. You'll notice as you scroll through after you download this, it's going to show you all the grade levels. So here's 2nd grade, Biological Evolution, and it's going to show you books here that you can use for that standard. And finally, ALA, the American Library Association. If you type American Library Association and read-alouds for science, it's going to take you here to a list of resources for science read-alouds. So these are just a few great resources that can help you as you're finding resources to implement read-alouds in your classroom and content areas. So in this brief presentation, we've talked about the importance of read-alouds, how you can incorporate read-alouds, and resources to find books to use for read-alouds. So pause the video and take a moment to reflect on how you will use read-alouds going forward. What will you do differently as a result of finding out about new resources for read-alouds, for example? So take a moment to pause the video, and when you are ready, proceed to the next slide. Let's end this presentation by reviewing our learning intention and success criteria. Our learning intention was to learn how to effectively use read-alouds in any classroom setting. And were we successful? Can you list the benefits of read-alouds in the classroom? Can you determine ways to use read-alouds in your classroom setting? And did you gain knowledge of read-alouds for science and social studies? If so, you have been successful, and our learning intention and success criteria was met for this session. I want to thank you for watching this presentation. I'm Robin Dixon, Pre-K through 5th grade ELA Social Studies Consulting Teacher. Should you have any further questions or wish to speak further, I have provided you with my work and cell number as well as my email. I would love to speak with you further about how you can implement read-alouds within your classroom.